very exciting panel. Thank you, Rohit, Carlos, Paul, Michelle, for letting me be part of this great conference here, virtual, but amazing. So we just heard a lot about innovation in food. Now, this next session, the next talks you hear will be about, well, innovation anyway, highly innovative, highly sustainable. That's all across. But we really want to focus a little more on the transition of startups to scale-ups and actually how they master that challenge. Yesterday at a dinner, we talked about the valleys of death, and we talked about the first two, but the third one is really this transition that will a company be eventually make it or not to scale up to be commercial. So we hear exciting stories about, well, companies from all kinds of areas. Also here we are starting with animal health, oral vaccination, we go through aquaculture, novel feed solutions, really out of the box, and then healthy, tasty, plant-based food solutions. These will be 4 shorter presentations, and again, the speakers will address it either in the slides or without the slides, this transition. But before we go there, let's look at a kind of case study, a company that really managed successfully this transition, startup, scale up. And so this happens to be the company which I joined close to 5 years ago. I'm glad you chose it, Rohit. So it's my pleasure to introduce Anna Rath, the president and CEO and board member of Vestaron. Anna joined Vestaron 3.5 years ago. I did 5, and really the success story started, I admit, when she came. So she has a master's in genetics in Michigan. She came back to Michigan later as a JD from Yale Law School. And after that, she proved herself and gained experience at McKinsey, did business development and commercial development at Ceres, back then an ag biotech biofuels company. After she realized she has all that stuff, she actually she founded her own, not ag biotech, but more seed and breeding biofuels company, and was really successful there, got the Rosalind Franklin Award for women in biotechnology. And if not, the oil prices had crashed and biofuel markets would have been destroyed. I think this company would have really been flourishing. But, well, good for Vestaron, she was available. And so we chose her. And so, Anna Rath, the stage is yours about Vestaron, startup to scale up.
Fantastic. I'm just sharing my screen here. Okay, is that working? Okay, perfect, thank you. So Vestaron has been part of this conference for a long time, longer than I have been part of Vestaron. So first, thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you all virtually and speaking to this group. And because of that long history, I suspect many of you actually already know what it is that Vestaron does, but for any who don't, fundamentally what we are doing is bringing a new class of molecules to the world of crop protection. That class of molecules is peptides, which are really just small proteins. What is revolutionary about them is that they combine every bit the same level of efficacy as your traditional synthetic small molecule chemicals with the safety and environmental profile of biologicals. And that is something that agriculture has not seen before. So you have all seen the headlines. You know, the world is moving in a very clear direction as it relates to sustainability in agriculture. But what that means for growers is really fewer and fewer solutions and greater restrictions on the ones that are available to them. So growers sit in the middle of all of this. On the one hand, They need to be able to grow a high yielding and high quality crop. On the other, they need to be able to protect their workers and their beneficial insects, their pollinators. And then they also increasingly need to meet consumer demands for safe and healthy and sustainable foods. And so, you know, just a couple of anecdotes to bring this to life. If you are an apple grower, your nemesis is the codling moth, right? And this is that in its larval form. If a codling moth takes a bite of the apple and doesn't die, it will enter into the apple. And when you take your truck of apples to your packer, if you have more than 5 to 10% bites, that truck will be rejected, $75,000 worth of apples, at which point you are on your way not to the fresh fruit supply chain, but rather to the processed fruit supply chain, where you will only receive 30 to 50% of the revenue that you were hoping for, and as a result will not have a profitable crop. So again, growers need effective crop protection. At the other end of the spectrum, you increasingly have consumer branded food companies who are listening to their consumers and feeling like they need to be able to back up their safety and sustainability claims, health claims to those consumers, and as a result are wading into the things that they do and don't want their growers to use for crop protection. So again, growers sitting in the middle of this being pulled in all directions. So the current options that are there really aren't continuing to meet grower need. Many of the synthetics have very problematic safety and environmental profiles. Many of the biologics that have come along just don't have the same efficacy as the traditional synthetics, particularly in insecticides, and as a result have not been able to displace those traditional chemistries. Lack of safety in some of those traditional chemistries leads to real issues, real operational issues in terms of workers being able to get back into the field, in terms of when you can harvest, in terms of when you can use those chemistries relative to a harvest. And there's been such a dearth of innovation that we've been trying to kill the same pests with the same pesticides for a really long time now, and they're just not working as well as they used to. So if that weren't bad enough, then the number of options available to growers is actually declining. And so you can see here, if you are a grower in the EU today, you have 65% fewer pesticides available for you to use than you had in 1991. And that is not a recipe for sustainable agriculture. So as regulatory scrutiny has gone up, product development timelines and costs have increased. And as a result, there has been just a dearth of innovation. So if you go back 40 years in the pharmaceutical industry, we would argue that it looks very much like ag chems today. It's all small molecule discovery and development, all done in-house inside a handful of majors. And they're hitting a wall because small molecules are really good at doing what they're supposed to do, which is bind to a target receptor and have a reliable interaction with that receptor. Problem is small molecules are promiscuous. So they also bind to things they are not supposed to bind to. And when they do that, they have side effects, often negative. That can be effects on human health, that can be effects on the environment, that can be effects on pollinators. So fast forward 40 years, and 8 of the 10 largest selling pharmaceutical molecules are now proteins. Why is that? There are 2 advantages of proteins over small molecules. And again, peptides are just small proteins. The first one is that peptides and proteins are larger molecules with larger binding sites. So they can have every bit that same reliable drug to target interaction that a small molecule has, but they're bigger molecules with bigger binding sites. And so they are much more specific in what they will bind to. The other great thing about proteins is sometimes it wasn't the original small molecule that was a problem, it was some metabolite of that molecule. Well, proteins degrade to amino acids, and our spear peptide, once it gets into the soil organic matrix, has a half-life of about 10 hours, despite having 30-day efficacy in a foliar spray. And so we believe that peptides have the ability to be every bit the same level of revolution in ag chems that biologics were in pharma. And we believe that because they really combine the best of both worlds. So before Vestaron, you had the synthetics, which were nice and cheap to produce and had great efficacy, but were really costly to develop and took a long time, and often again had issues with safety and environmental profile. You had the microbials on the other hand, which were basically the opposite. So cheap and quick to develop, but just didn't have that same efficacy. Sometimes issues with production. And so what we've done with peptides is really taken the best of both of those worlds. So we are cheap and quick to develop in the same way as microbials, but we have that efficacy and those more reliable production costs, low production costs of the synthetics. So all the great things about peptides, we've talked about their safety, obviously sustainable. We use a yeast-based manufacturing system, highly efficacious, same as the traditional synthetics in some cases because we're targeting the same receptors. These are novel modes of action for these peptides, so there is no cross-resistance with any existing solution. And because of that larger, more flexible binding site, we actually think it will be more difficult for pests to develop resistance to peptides. And then finally, they are drop-in and extremely flexible solutions for growers. So we have our first peptide on the market. Spear was launched last year, so we're in our second commercial year. We expect to have our second AI basin on the market in 2023, and then 2024 and beyond, we expect to start being able to bring 2 active ingredients to market per year. To start with insecticides, because that is, again, where the dearth of innovation is the greatest. If you are unfamiliar with the world of insecticides, then you may not have heard of the IRAC committee. That is the Insect Resistance Action Committee. These guys are like the gods of insecticides. They decide if your insecticide works the same as somebody else's or works differently. And that's really important because growers know that the way to stave off resistance is to rotate through different modes of action. And so the way they are trained to do that is to rotate through different IRAC mode of action codes. And so the whole history of insecticidal chemistry, there are 32 acknowledged modes of action by the IRAC committee. Of those, 14 are nerve and muscular. Those turn out to be far and away the most effective ways to kill an insect. Those 14 nerve and muscular modes of action actually only target 8 different receptors in an insect, and 6 of those are most important. So the 6 receptors that you see listed here control more than 80% of the global $18 billion insecticidal chemistry market. And so what are we doing? We are basically going through and redrugging these proven multi-billion-dollar drug targets with safe, environmentally friendly peptides. Spear targets the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor, as does our second peptide basin. Our third peptide dictate targets the voltage-gated sodium channel. And you can see here with sort of the shaded icons that we have programs against most of the rest of these receptors already in process and plans for the rest of them as well. And it works. So the peptides that come out of our development program have every bit the same potency as traditional synthetics, in some cases much greater potency. And so what you see here is the number of molecules per gram of insect that it takes to get 50% knockdown, which is a standard measurement used by entomologists. And you can see that our first 2 peptides, Spear and Basin, hold their own against some of the most potent peptides ever. And then you get to a molecule like Dictate, which is even another level of potent beyond that. And so these things do have that same efficacy of the traditional synthetics and can therefore actually be drop-in replacements for them. So what does all of this mean for the grower? So the things that are really driving our initial commercial success with the grower are the fact that that Spear is the first novel nerve and muscular mode of action in 14 years. The whole rest of the industry, all the egg majors put together, haven't come up with a single one since the diamides in 2007. And Spear does have efficacy on par with those traditional synthetics. So when they see the data, when they know it's a novel nerve and muscular mode of action, therefore an opportunity to overcome any resistance issues that they're seeing, that makes the initial sale. Also, we price at parity with the leading synthetics, so that doesn't hurt. And then, as mentioned, not only are we drop in, we create huge flexibility for growers. And that gets to this additional value realized in use, which is you can spray when there are pollinators in the field. You only have a 4-hour worker reentry interval. You have a 0-day pre-harvest interval, and you have no regulated residues, so no need to even measure. And so that is a pretty strong overall ROI for your growers because there's 0 incremental spend and there's all of these benefits, both in terms of actual cost savings, but also in terms of reduced risk of loss because of the efficacy, and then of course the ability to meet those growing consumer demands. So now the story of how we got to where we are today. So in late 2017, the board, the investors of Vestaron really had this realization. The kind of key technical hurdles associated with the product had been overcome, or with the platform had been overcome, but the company was really in need of a clear vision and, quite frankly, had a reputation for not always perfectly executing. And so they realized that the company was going to need to commercialize a product. It wasn't just going to be bought as a platform company. It was going to need to commercialize a product in order to realize the potential value. And so they decided to look for a more commercially oriented CEO to lead that charge, and that was me. And so what I inherited was a 15-person R&D team, amazing R&D team, tight-knit, really highly productive, that had just overcome some amazing technical hurdles. As Andy mentioned, he beat me to the company by a little over a year. The company had just, despite already having a product in registration, hired its very first agronomist. And then I also inherited a CFO who let me know on my first day of the job that she was about to retire. So there was that. And then, the company had really been aiming at proof of concept, not at being a fully commercial company. And so things like gross margins weren't really a focus. And some of those key relationships with, distributors and manufacturers were really not what the company needed in order to be sustainable and profitable. And so it fell to me to build all of that out, right? So, and everything starts from the vision. So the first thing was solidifying that vision around Vestaron as the peptide company, first in crop protection and then beyond. Then, of course, the next most important thing is the team. And so very rapidly hired the rest of the team. And that was the reason for the shift in headquarters to the Raleigh-Durham area of North Carolina, where that talent was going to be much more readily accessible. And then once you've got the senior team in place, you build out beyond that, get to your consistent at-scale manufacturing, keep picking away at those gross margins until they are, solidly positive. And then fix some of those relationships, right? To get the distribution network in place that you really need, get the right, not just one, but multiple manufacturers in place so that you've got a reliable supply chain. And then, of course, you need some money. And we needed some new investors because some of ours have been with the company for a really long time. And as a result, we're structurally no longer able to support it. And so finally, all of that leads to then the outcome, which is great market traction for our first peptide sphere, and then already now our second peptide working its way through registration. And so what's next? So now that we have our feet under us with Spear in the US, we are looking abroad. So we expect to be in both Canada and Mexico next year. We also expect to be submitting to the EU next year, and so on the market sometime around 2025. We've got a really rich pipeline of candidates that we want to advance, both in the US and in all of those other markets that we are now eyeing. We want to just expand the size of the pipe in R&D so that we can be bringing things to market even faster. And then finally, we get to start thinking about spaces beyond production agriculture, field production agriculture. And so there are some that are, an easy sidestep into things like forestry and consumer lawn and garden. But then, of course, insecticidal peptides also have potential applications in things like animal health and baits or vector control in public health. And then peptides have, of course, application not just in agriculture and these other sort of related fields, but potentially much more broadly. And so we expect to also try to leverage the platform into even yet further afield spaces. So that is what I have.
That was amazing. And of course, you didn't say what really was key. It sounds so easy. Commercially oriented CEO. Okay, sure. And it sounds like really, okay, this is like the recipe how you are successful, but it's not easy at all. And so that's not a question, it's more a comment. you know, when I congratulate the board, the Vestaron board back then that they chose you. And that was, you know, that it's, there were candidates that were much closer to the field, but I think it's more about also does the CEO, the new CEO, so to say, fit to the culture of the company? And there was a great fit. You didn't know it maybe, but yeah, there was a great fit, and all these simply the diligence, the drive, and to move forward, that was all there. Anyway, I think that's how it was so easy in the end. Yeah, okay, well, good. Scale up, yes, that's done, but it's not really done. So where will this company go in this interesting time, kind of almost post-COVID?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I think peptides are revolutionary in crop protection. I think they have the ability to disrupt the ag chems industry in exactly the same way that protein-based biologics disrupted pharma. And so again, look at where it is today, and 8 of the 10 largest selling pharmaceutical molecules are proteins. And you have companies like Amgen and Genentech, who were once the little upstarts, right? But they were the ones who first had that handle on the revolutionary technology. And so I see no reason why Vestaron doesn't have a similar future.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
There's one question, but I think we need to move on, but I'll ask quickly. So, yeah, Anna. There's one question. Can these peptides target a narrow range of insect species, or are they largely broad spectrum?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Actually, what we're starting to see is a correlation between potency and specificity. So generally speaking, our peptides are broad spectrum, but in order to make them efficacious, we have to figure out how to get these larger molecules across the gut wall of the insect. And we do that by pairing with gut disruptors, something that basically gives the insects little ulcers. And some of the first gut disruptors that we are using are BTs. And so those also have obviously great species selectivity. So as of today with Spear, we get most of our selectivity from the BTs that we pair with. But we have seen deeper into the pipeline some of the highly potent peptides that are themselves specific to particular classes of insects.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Time to move on. Thanks, Anna. So it's my pleasure to introduce Jenny Philby, the founding CEO of Mazen Animal Health. And Jenny studied chemistry and has a PhD from Virginia Tech in physical chemistry. A lot of respect. That was the only one where I had to take the exam twice when I studied. Well, you have a broad background, very big company background at Höchst, where you worked as a scientist, senior scientist, and then a series of business development roles in several biotech and pharma startup companies. You have your own consulting business, and I think through this consulting business, you actually became aware of Mazen Animal Health. And as we will hear, Mazen has to do with maize, with the maize that you were challenged with to find your way through, and the amazing actually solution you found for animal health. Okay, I don't want to say more. Jennifer, your stage.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It really is a thrill to be here and tell you about how we're achieving the dream of oral vaccination. So in this session, I'd like to tell you about what we do, how we do it, and how we got there, and share with you that startup to scale up that we have been experiencing. So what do? We are basically game-changing oral animal disease prevention.
Jennifer, we have some problems. Okay, we lost Jennifer.
All right.
I think here she is again.
All right, Jenny, you're muted.
Jenny, still muted. We want to hear you.
We can't see your screen. Here we go.
Yes, yes, yes.
Mute. Okay, so you can hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Good. Sorry
Yes.
about that. You know, the joys of being remote. So how are we revolutionizing animal disease prevention? We are creating edible vaccines in corn seed and grinding that corn seed and either feeding it to production animals or formulating it into a treat for companion animals. So you might be asking yourself, well, why corn? What's so great about corn seed? Well, corn has a lot of qualities that actually make it an optimum production platform for vaccination. So corn production is not that costly. And the work that the scientific founder, Dr. John Howard, has done his career in working on increasing that expression level in corn seed, we now have a highly productive system to generate vaccines. In addition to that, corn seeds are pretty good for proteins. They have carbohydrates and proteolytic enzyme inhibitors that stabilize that protein as it's being eaten and going through the GI tract to really create a controlled release of the vaccine. And then in parallel, that stability also is advantageous in processing of the product into pellets or whatever's required for the feed. Finally, corn is part of a production animal's diet. So we're not introducing anything foreign, and the producer knows how to work with corn. It fits very well into their systems. So I didn't make this up. Where did this come from? And this is part of our origin story. So I met John Howard, the scientific founder, probably the first time 20 years ago when I was working at Nobex in RTP. And then about 10, 11 years later, as a part of one of my clients at New Perspectives, he was interested in creating edible vaccines for humans. I worked with him on that, but the more I learned about what he was doing, I kept saying, John, do you realize the impact this vaccine production platform would have on animal health? Are you aware of the challenges that producers and farmers have today in vaccinating their animals? Now, vaccines have done great things for productivity, but still the farmers have to find labor that is willing to handle animals, go through a barn, handle each animal, inject them in just the right place, don't inject themselves, don't break the needle off in the poor animal. And really, there's some negative impacts associated with animal handling. John's oral vaccine technology really provides an elegant solution to the challenges of injectable vaccination. It would create a system where the animal doesn't even know they're being vaccinated. So John listens to this whole story over and over and over again, and I think he just got tired of hearing it. And he finally was like, okay, Jenny, then why don't you do it? And I said, be careful what you ask for. So we spun out Mazen from his research institute, created the company in 2016. So that was 5 years ago. So it was a challenge, I'll admit, to raise money to start, but we were able to do that and to create a vaccine that enhances biosecurity for our customer, that improves animal welfare, that our consumers are asking for, and clearly is less costly to administer. So with a recent financing that we did earlier this year, we were able to add to our team 2 incredibly experienced scientists in the field of animal vaccines. Rick Sybil has been in technical sales with veterinarians for Merck Animal Health for many years. Mark Zelstra spent his career in animal vaccine development, specifically regulatory, manufacturing, and quality. Now we have the team in place to really move forward into commercialization. And actually that's what we're doing. So we have run a study that has shown indeed oral vaccination works. Our first product is in porcine epidemic diarrhea virus, and that causes nearly 100% mortality in newborn pigs. So we vaccinated the sows during their gestation. We challenged the newborn pigs at about day 4. And indeed, over 90% of the pigs born to control sows, those who did not receive the vaccine, didn't make it. In contrast to the pigs born to the sows that received the oral vaccine, we saw 53%. Now, you might say, well, it's not 100%, but remember, this is an incredibly robust challenge. And actually, the vet who ran the study for us at PRI and Ames has been running studies since PED broke in 2013. And he said, actually, Jenny, this is the best result we've ever seen for a vaccine against PED. So we're pretty excited. So where do we go from here? Well, with our team in place, we are now scaling up. So we have a product in the field. I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. And we are walking through the regulatory process. So we are doing a confirmatory study that finishes up next month. And then we'll be proceeding to efficacy and safety studies, which are required by the Center for Veterinary Biologics for approval, with our eye on launching the product in the first half of 2023. And this is all taking place with the team that we have in conjunction with the scientific founder. And it's a very exciting time for us. And so for the investors in the room, we're raising a Series A right now. And that Series A will take us to market with our first product. It will take us through regulatory studies, not all the way through, but partially through regulatory studies with 2 more products, enable us to really build out our R&D team and bring 3 additional products forward. So as we talk more about scale up and the journey from field to farm, we're growing corn. Obviously, there's some R&D work that goes on before that. That corn is harvested and stored until ready for studies or commercial sales. It's ground up. It is then for further manufacture. That's a classification of the CVB, shipped for final packaging into final use product, and then directly to the customer. So here's a picture of the field earlier this year. You're looking at PED, and right to the right is coccidiosis, which is our next product in development for poultry. And so as we talk about what are the opportunities in the landscape ahead of us that we are plowing forward, well, clearly we've talked about a swine vaccine. Poultry vaccines are in our horizon, as are vaccines for aquaculture, ruminants, and companion animals. We'll project a launch in 2023 and profitability in 2025. So it's a very exciting time for our company. We are thrilled with the support that we're getting from really the entire entrepreneurial community, and would love to talk to any investors in the room who are interested in participating in our Series A round. So I'll finish up by saying that we are so lucky to have a very experienced leadership team. We've got great data now. It's taken a while to get there, but we've got great data, which offers a truly strong and robust value proposition for our customer. And with that, we're standing on a very solid platform that covers a range of species and a range of disease types, which will enable us to grow strong to a self-standing company or exit to a company that is interested in expanding what we can do. So I really enjoyed addressing my North Carolina colleagues who are near and dear to my heart. And hopefully we'll be setting up some R&D facilities in the area in the near future. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and see if there's any questions I can answer.
Thank you, Jenny. I got a sign, no questions allowed, but I still have a comment or question. This was a beautiful cornfield. It was not in Ames, Iowa, right?
No, it was in California, grown in controlled conditions. You know, all the regulatory rules are being filed, but yes, this is corn growing vaccine.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Amazing. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce Sylvia Wolfe, President and CEO of AquaBounty. Sylvia joined the company in 2019. So recently, the company itself and the innovations date back much further. I'm sure she'll talk about it. Sylvia has a background in finance and an MBA, all in Illinois and Chicago, and is really an experienced leader. Is was president of Guardian Food Technologies, led actually the US foods, meat, seafood, and produce business, is on various boards, including the executive board member of Bio, and well, AquaBounty. Well, you will talk more about it. It's really very exciting, not just aquaculture, but really an out-of-the-box solution to this. Sylvia.
Thanks, Andy. Let me pull up my screen. Some reason it's not showing up. Okay. Hang on one second. I'm trying to get I've got the presentation ready, but it doesn't seem to want to let me share it.
Hope we get it soon, because otherwise I'm still on.
I know. Here we go. There we go. All right. Let me go back to this and say, all right.
Yes.
So first of all, let me thank everyone for allowing me to share the story of AquaBounty. And it's really an interesting story when we think about startup to scale up. We are the first genetically engineered animal that's been approved for food use. And being a pioneer is not without its challenges and its risks, as many in the audience are aware, and certainly the two people that preceded me know exactly what it's like to be a pioneer. On the right-hand side of the screen, what you'll see is we actually began in 1989 with the research that was done that incorporated a Chinook salmon gene into an Atlantic salmon to try to protect that salmon during its early stages of development. Fast forward to 2021, and we're just now beginning to commercialize that product. And so startups are not for the faint of heart. We're a purpose-driven.
Jenny, we still see that first slide. There's a sand clock. Something is delaying your presentation, I guess, on your computer.
So population growth is really one of the things that, as a purpose-driven organization, we recognized requires some new solutions, particularly as we try to meet the growing need for protein, which means that aquaculture itself is going to be a significant contributor to filling that gap. As we think about the pressure that places on the oceans and the environment, we believe that we have a better solution. And when we talk about Atlantic salmon specifically, it's a large and growing market, but it has a highly inefficient supply chain with a carbon footprint that certainly isn't the one for the future. And so we saw an opportunity to make a real difference. And that is to take our genetic.
Sylvia, can you hear me? You're not advancing your slides. We're still on your title slide.
Oh.
So you need to.
It's advancing for me. I see it. Okay.
Uh-oh. It's not in presentation mode. It's not in presentation mode. Maybe you got to go in presentation mode and then click through. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's the.
Did that work? Is that showing up?
No, you need to go to the right at the bottom. There's a monitor. There's an icon of a monitor. Choose that, because that'll put you into presentation mode.
I did that, and
I think she's frozen. I think she probably needs to start the share again.
Okay, you probably need to start sharing again.
All right, hang on.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, let's try this one more time.
And go F5, and you should be able to, when you get your presentation up. Go F5 and there you go.
All right, is it in presentation mode?
No. It is trying to. F5, if you do F5, that may help.
That didn't work either.
Okay, you might just have to go slide by slide in that case. So, you know.
Okay.
On the left, just go slide by slide when you get to the left there.
All right, let me go back to here because I think this is the slide that, All right, it's not allowing me to go into presentation mode, so I'm not really sure why. Anyways, the point is that we believe that we have a solution that provides a real difference, and that is to use biotechnology and specific genetics to be able to address that gap in salmon production, meeting that growing demand in a way that allows us to raise salmon in a land-based recirculating aquaculture system. And so we believe that our competitive points of difference are really the way that we farm, which allows us to protect and utilize our natural resources in a very efficient way, while using biotechnology to be able to attain that. And the chart on the right-hand side, we've already been through what many startups view as the holy grail, and that is an IPO. And so what that does is put a different set of challenges in front of us as we navigate through the investor community and continue to need to provide working capital to be able to scale our business and grow. The aquaculture industry itself presents a real opportunity, and that is because, one, it's highly fragmented, two, it's not very technical, and three, it is exactly what's necessary to fill that protein gap and doing it in an environmentally friendly way. When we think about our company specifically, it's really about utilizing genetics, both in terms of selective breeding, gene editing, and accelerated trait delivery across a range of species, while doing that in an environment that we believe protects the oceans and also creates a biosecure environment in which to raise the fish or the seafood. And so we think that land-based aquaculture, even in its nascent stages, is the way of the future because we will be able to continue to optimize that technology. In addition, we have a number of R&D efforts going on around health, productivity, and disease prevention in the species where we operate today. We're at an inflection point from a commercialization standpoint, thinking about how do we scale the business now that we're in commercial production. And that really is to expand to a large scale, 8 times the size of our largest existing farm, and be able to grow and meet that continuing demand for salmon. So we've been ramping up production, and we actually achieved our first commercial harvest of AquaAdvantage salmon in May of this year. And we'll be bringing that salmon to market. We have a backlog of orders, which bodes well for the future because the question has always been, will consumers be willing to eat a genetically engineered salmon? And the answer to that is yes. And we think that consumer perception around GMOs is changing as we think about how are we going to solve some of the significant global challenges that we face. And we're taking a very proactive approach in the way that we work with those customers. And many of them view this type of farming as a way to create long-term supply agreements because it really is precision agriculture. And we have the strongest balance sheet that we've ever had in the history of the company, which really does allow us to think about how are we going to scale the business and grow. Our plan is to reach 50 million tons of production by the year 2030. And that means a new farm every 18 months, both in North America and overseas. This is a rendering of the farm that we've announced in Pioneer, Ohio, which will be our first large-scale 10,000 metric ton farm. It'll have the latest technology, and we believe that because it is located in the agricultural heartland, it allows us to think through utilization of all of our waste streams more effectively. And everyone talks about circularity of resources, and our farms are designed to be able to enable that. But North America is not our only target. We look at other markets that are very similar to the US and North America in that they are net importers. So the US imports 400,000 metric tons of Atlantic salmon every year. We're not self-sufficient. this type of farming allows us to begin to become more self-sufficient. But markets like ours are Brazil, where we have just received regulatory approval, Israel, which views food security as national security, and China and Southeast Asia, because there's a growing demand for salmon and protein in particular. So let me just conclude that our Aqua Advantage salmon, we really do believe, has been engineered for today's challenges. It's better for the environment, and because we have greater throughput because of our growth cycles of our salmon and the fact that they consume 25% less feed to reach the same harvest weights as conventional, there's more for consumers. So faster growth, better feed conversions, raised in a biosecure environment, that allows us to raise our fish without chemicals or antibiotics. It's symbiotic with aquaponics and hydroponics. So we think about what's going on in vertical farming right now, and we believe that co-location is another opportunity for us in the future. And just as importantly, you know, a better carbon footprint, because you're not flying salmon all over the world, but producing close to consumers and close to consumptions. And what consumers have told us is the most important characteristics to them are affordability, accessibility, and taste. And because we can check all those boxes, we believe that we're poised for real commercial success. So thank you very much for taking the time. And Andy, back to you.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. That was very convincing, and also really disrupting business model, right? Land-based aquaculture. It's a lot of, let's say, infrastructure needed. Did you consider partnering here?
So we've chosen to go into production. And the reason for that is really because of the regulatory environment that we operate under. We are regulated as an animal pharmaceutical. When we started the regulatory process, there really wasn't a pathway forward. And so we went to the Center for Veterinary Medicine, and our eggs are actually considered an animal pharmaceutical, but our facilities are actually regulated by FDA as well, and require 6 levels of physical containment, in addition to the fact that our fish are sterile females. So without being able to run the facilities under those regulatory requirements, it probably makes more sense for us to do it ourselves right now.
Okay, thank you, understood. Thanks very much, Sylvia. We are moving on to the next speaker, next company. Liz Koutsos is the president of Enviroflight, sorry. Good to see you, Liz. And Liz is, well, an expert. She didn't only study PhD, she was an assistant professor, essentially in animal science at Cal Poly. And well, is a hard worker. Looks like she always worked her way up from scientist to director at Missouri Exotic Animal Nutrition, and also with Enviroflight. At first, you did the operations regulatory, and then soon after became the CEO. And you have really a super exciting story about a very first glance unusual, let's say, feed solution, animal feed solution. But at a closer look, very convincing, and also an interesting exit. Still in scale up, but already an exit. This, the stage.
Thank you, and I will try to share my screen. Let's hope it's successful. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm really excited to be here today and talk about Enviroflight. We develop high quality, sustainable insect-based ingredients, yes, insects for animals. And the evolution of our company was really to try to help be part of the sustainable solution that we know we all need to meet the challenges of food insecurity. And I won't spend time on this slide except to say there's lots of different solutions, and we've heard from so many different companies talking about how they are trying to accomplish these noble objectives. We are focusing on alternative proteins and specifically on insect-derived ingredients. Why black soldier fly? So we chose this species because, first of all, it's omnivorous. So we can feed it virtually any feedstock. And so that gives us a lot of flexibility, both seasonally and regionally, to adapt to byproducts from the food and feed industry. So essentially, we don't want to take feedstocks that can go into human or other animal species mouths. We want to take things that are destined for landfill, which may otherwise contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, and upcycle them with this larva to create high value protein and energy. Additionally, the black soldier fly is native worldwide, found on every continent except Antarctica, so not considered a pest or an invasive species. So we have a little less concern from a regulatory control perspective for maintaining our animal populations. And they don't carry any zoonotic diseases. So that presents a huge opportunity both for our personnel safety and for the safety of the animals that we want to feed these larvae to. The insect world in general has received a tremendous amount of funding because of the amazing yield potential of insects. From the time that the eggs are laid for these larvae, we take them to market in 14 to 18 days. About 5% of the larvae are retained to become flies and be part of our breeding stock. And those animals only live for about 40 days. So with those very fast life cycles, we can get a lot of production on an annualized basis. In addition, we can farm vertically. And so in the dark blue bars, you can see the land usage that is required for traditional terrestrial protein production systems, animal-based protein production systems. And we use significantly less land because frankly, I can farm 30, 40, 50 meters in the air. It's really just depends on what the engineers are able to support structurally. We also generally use less feed and water than traditional animal protein production systems. This is dependent on the feedstock that we use and the environment in which we grow the larvae. So these parameters can change depending on management of an operation. And then finally, insects are 100% edible. So unlike chickens or pigs or cows, where there are components that can be further processed and be used in the supply chain for feeding to animals or humans or creating value-added components, we can harvest the entire insect species and turn that directly into energy and protein that can be fed to other animals. And so the net result is that the protein contribution on a per pounds of protein per acre per year can be quite substantially higher for insect production systems. And the data that I show here are textbook data representing about 10-fold increase over highly productive algal-based systems. And what we see in commercial operations is more like 1 million metric tons of protein, 1 million pounds of protein per acre per year. So really amazing yield potential of insects. We think that not only are we able to produce a lot of nutrition, healthy nutrition, we have a lot of other applications of our products. So what is produced in our facility is this whole dried larva product from which we partially defat this and create a high protein meal. The oil component and then the biomass is called frass. And this represents the excreta of the insects and their exoskeletons as they go through multiple instar phases during their life. The basis for a lot of the initial funding for scale up of insect-based production systems has really been focused on nutritional applications. So a lot of that has been focused on aquaculture systems and particularly to replace fish meal. And we know that we can effectively be an alternative for fish meal in not only aquaculture systems, but in other livestock feeding programs. So there's a tremendous amount of nutritional application. In addition, that biomass, the frass, is an excellent source of NPK as a natural fertilizer. And so there's quite a bit of opportunity for plant-based nutrition applications as well. But in addition to these applications that kind of drove the industry growth to begin with, we know there's a whole lot of other applications that are being developed by us and others. So first, animal welfare. There's been quite a bit of research demonstrating improvement in animal welfare when either these whole dried larvae or live larvae are fed to animals like chickens and pigs, and can effectively reduce stereotypic behavior and promote natural foraging behavior, and thus improve clinical measures of animal welfare. In addition, there's quite a bit of effort looking into nutraceutical applications. Insects, as part of their innate immune system, produce a variety of antimicrobial peptides. Those peptides can be found in that high protein meal fraction, and they have efficacy post-processing. So those activities can be found even within that finished product. Those proteins and those peptides have been shown to have anti-inflammatory activity, to promote oxidative, reduce reactive oxygen species, and to promote clinical resistance and resilience to disease in both livestock species and really exciting in pets. In addition, black soldier fly larvae produce lauric acid, a C12 saturated fatty acid, which also has very potent antiviral and antimicrobial activity. And that gives us a lot of application both on the nutraceutical side for livestock and pet food markets, but also in the cosmetic and food markets, because lauric acid is a huge component of many cosmetics and food applications, naturally derived from palm and coconut oil. And we're really excited to be producing a much more sustainable source of this, particularly for North American applications. And then finally, really, really exciting technology coming out in materials science, using things like chitin and chitosan, components of the insect exoskeleton, to do things like produce micro vaccines and encapsulation of drugs. So a whole lot of really exciting technology coming out of this very simple system and a very small number of products. Just briefly, our evolution, the company was originally founded in 2009 in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and this is called the Love Shack. And if you Google us, you will find this. But really the trajectory of growth started in 2013 when Darling Ingredients investigated the ability of these larvae to use waste streams, byproducts from their industry. And so they provided funding for a pilot plant scale up. And that translated into a JV forming in 2016 between Darling Ingredients and Intrexon. In 2018, through that JV and its funding, we opened the first commercial scale facility in Maysville, Kentucky. It's about 100,000 square feet of breeding, growing, and processing of black soldier fly larvae. And this year we will complete a doubling of that operation in Kentucky. And then we're really, really proud to have announced recently in 2022, we will be opening our new R&D and corporate facility right here in the Triangle in Apex, North Carolina. So when I joined the company, we had a very, very small team, about 15 people. In 2017, we're now over 100 and in 5 states. And what we've done over the last 4 or 5 years is really focus on building our talent and helping grow in the variety of areas that are really critical to building this industry. So nutrition has been critical, really the application of our ingredients to different animal species. Our regulatory process has probably not been as cumbersome as some others, but we do have to demonstrate safety through FDA and AFCO so that we can get approval for our ingredients for feeding to animals. Marketing has been key. We've had to build this market. So we do face this concept of, this is a novel or a very strange ingredient. And so we've really spent a lot of effort and time trying to help the consumer and our potential customers understand the value that these ingredients bring. A lot of work on engineering and automation for our commercial scale operations. And frankly, automating live animal production systems is quite challenging. So we're excited to work with some of the experts in the field on this. And then our research and development program really focuses on genetics, immunology, and insect biology, really to better understand how we can harvest the potential of this animal. We're really at our infancy of understanding its opportunities and how we can use it and create new opportunities for growth for the industry. Our future, so regulatory approvals are a big barrier for us and for the industry in general. So again, we work really hard on safety dossiers presented to FDA to achieve AFCO approval. Right now, black soldier fly are the only insect species in the United States that have a regulatory approval for feeding to any animal species. And we continue to drive that growth. We hope to have an all species definition in the next couple of years. We work closely with the North American Coalition for Insects and Agriculture to set industry standards for regulatory efforts and safety. Again, helping build the industry. It's not just about building our company, but it's about building the industry as a whole. And that goes hand in hand with the building market awareness. So pounding the pavement virtually now as much as in person, but getting out in trade shows and meeting customers and explaining what we do. And then finally, internally, a whole lot of effort looking at operational efficiencies. And then as we look towards the future, it's really about, I think Sylvia mentioned, co-location with either our inputs, our feedstock streams, or with our customers so that we can really reduce the supply chain, stay local and regional, and make our sustainability impact that much more relevant. So I really appreciate the time. I'm grateful to be here and would love to have more conversation.
Thank you very much, Liz. Great, but obviously shows smart ideas at the beginning and also perfect execution helped here. Question, Darling Ingredients. Okay, how did this connection come? And actually, is Darling now profiting from actually Enviroflight's knowledge on insect raising and all that, or is it the other way around?
I would say it's the other way around. We are very, very fortunate to be wholly owned by Darling. Darling likes to say they were green before green was cool. So they're a recycler. They take byproducts from the food and feed industry and create value-added ingredients, things for the human nutrition market, plant nutrition market, and biomedical industry. And so we've really leveraged their expertise on transforming raw materials into value-added ingredients. We've been very, very fortunate to have their support.
Mm-hmm. And how did the connection come?
The connection came because they made an original investment into the company to help understand if some of their byproduct streams could be used as feedstocks, and therefore a kind of a bioremediation project of their byproduct streams by the black soldier fly larva.
Thank you very much. Yes. Are we moving on, or is there another question? I think we are moving on, right?
Thank you very much, Andy.
Thank you, Liz. Mm-hmm. So last but not least, Chad Rosen is the founder and CEO of Victory Hemp Foods, and founded the company in 2014, where he, I think from California, you moved to Kentucky, right? That's where you are.
Yeah.
Great. And so you are, well, you have a business background and you had leading positions in very diverse industry, but they all had in common, if I saw that right, being highly innovative and sustainable, right? From glass countertops to other building materials and these previous companies. So, well, you obviously fell in love with hemp. And if I look back at my hemp times, yes, back in BASF, we actually used, well, we called it flax because I thought the varieties that have more the seeds are called flax and the fibers are more, fiber varieties are more the hemp. It is a beautiful plant, it's a beautiful flower. So we're looking forward to hear how to make healthy, tasty, sustainable food. Your stage, Chad.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Can you I can hear the background. I hear there's some good jostling going on over your experience in hemp, but we won't get into your background with hemp. We're just going to talk about what the future of this plant looks like. Can you see my screen? Are we looking at making a big impact with one mighty seed? All right, great. Look, you know, I want to tell you, this isn't going to be an infomercial about our company as much as it's going to be a story, a big story about a little seed. And since this is a seed that's been left under the potato basket for the last 80 years, this story reads a little bit like what's old is new again. So the problem is obvious, right? Our planet's population is exploding. And this is something that we've heard a lot over and over from all the other presenters today, and it's one that we need to catalyze and all kind of rally around. And I think there's 100 different solutions to get to get to a place where we are overcoming the challenges that we're facing. Today's food sources and ingredients predominantly rely on unsustainable agriculture practices or food ingredients that don't taste good or function well enough to be widely adopted into flexitarian diets. That's how we kind of see the problem. From my perspective, my personal experience, 2050 is 29 years away. And by then, I'm going to be 72 years old. And I still hope to be somewhat relevant by then. I guarantee that if I'm going to be relevant, I'll continue to eat 3 balanced meals a day, which includes protein in the center of the plate. So let's just pull on this thread a little. Let's call it a 1/4 pound of protein, sometimes more, sometimes less. So to get to 2050, for me, we're talking about 8,000 pounds of protein. The hanging weight on the average USDA prime beef cattle is about 490 pounds. So to satiate my march to 2050, the guillotine's going to need to drop on 16 bovine, right? 1,800 gallons of water for 1 pound of protein. So we're going to need to set aside 14 million gallons gallons of water for my protein. Now, of course, this is all related to beef cattle, and we can play this out with other forms of protein, animals that are more efficient in converting grains into proteins, chicken, pork, etc. But beef just has good data, and we eat a lot of it. So I use that example here. But animal agriculture has challenges, and we need alternative solutions. I think that's the main point here. And I want to make this clear. This isn't a conversation today about the dogma of animal protein consumption, the morality of the whole system. It's about economic value. It's about the size of the market, and it's about our ability to scale to meet that need, right? That we need to meet. So Back to the Future, by 2050, I've finally perfected my smoked brisket recipe, but I'm going to be joined by 3 billion new bellies here on planet Earth as the global population pushes to 10 billion from 7 billion where it stands today. And the amount of resources needed to support that is with our current system is simply unsustainable. There's some stats on the screen. I'd be happy to share our slide, but 5 billion burgers is what we consume in America per year. It's in 50% of the grain that we grow on our arable acres are going towards grain to feeding that livestock. 27% of greenhouse gas emissions from our agriculture system reliant on animals. So it's a big problem. And the solution is, I think is obvious to a lot of folks. It's alternative proteins and lipids, but to feed everyone and prolong the life of the planet, hemp foods or plant-based foods must be delicious and functional. Victory Hemp Foods, that's our company, has unlocked the potential of hemp seeds to produce superior, nutritious, sustainably grown, tasty plant-based ingredients, right? That's the cornerstone of making this work. Consumers already say that they're willing to eat plant-based solutions if they taste good. They describe themselves as flexitarians, and the numbers support a march towards plant-based solutions, right, from a sustainability story with emissions and water usage. So thank you for the introduction. I'm Chad Rosen. I'm the founder of Victory Hemp Foods. In 2014, I followed the legislation of industrial hemp, and I developed a thesis, and that was here in the United States, that with the cover of a research provision, we would have at least 4 years to carve out a supply chain and develop an unadulterated, good-for-you food ingredient before industrial food and the big ag complex determined what would happen to this tremendous potential solution to food and economic inequality. And so with that, I moved from a little town in Southern California called San Diego to a thriving metropolis with 800 people and 5 Baptist churches, then 1 blinking stoplight, to learn how hemp might fit into the rotation from the upstream perspective, which is the farmer's perspective. So today, Victory Hemp Foods, we have 22 employees. We're a vertically coordinated business-to-business primary food ingredient processing company, and we're on a mission to help realize the potential to commercialize hemp seeds for farmers, brands, and consumers. We manufacture superior plant proteins, healthy fats, and low-calorie sweeteners from hemp seeds with premium taste and performance advantages for brands and product manufacturers. We're USDA organic on the products that come from organic supply chains. We're kosher. We're Project Non-GMO verified. We have direct contracts with farmers and a trusted supply chain. And we're in the Ohio River Valley. If any of you are all in Kentucky, I heard from our last presenter. I'm excited to connect after the presentation or the event and come see what y'all are doing down there. But feel free to come visit us in Louisville or Carrollton anytime you're in the area. We'd love to share what we're doing. So look, this is a big problem, right? And it's a big opportunity. Ongoing consumer shift towards creating wholesome diets means that the combined